we continue our journey of digging deeper into the experience of Ubuntu, the miracle of forgiveness. Last week, we took our first stab at trying to understand how forgiveness is the heart of the gospel, that as our physical heart enables other organs in the body to function, so does forgiveness enable the different components of discipleship to function um, in the life of one who follows Jesus. Last week we looked at how the miracle of forgiveness, Ubuntu, um, changes our understanding of justice and enables us to understand that justice can still prevail in the lifestyle of being forgiven and forgiving. Just as the different organs of the body are dependent upon our physical heart, so are the components of discipleship dependent on forgiveness to sort of come to life. Last week we dealt with justice. This week, the second component is the component of being healed. Um, now, being healed is something that we um, think about oftentimes in terms of miracles, physical miracles that happen within the body. We can't understand how they happen, but they happen. But healing in terms of spiritual healing is right out of our understanding of Ubuntu when the description of Ubuntu includes um, it's for the self-interest of the one who forgives. Um, Forgiveness is for the good of both the one who is forgiven and the one who forgives. That's the very best form of self-interest, being healed and being made whole. Now, I had never seen this as clearly as I did on a muggy, hot day in rural Liberia. 2,000 people were gathered to celebrate the first session of the annual conference for several years because of the successful um, rebel-led war in Liberia. My friend Bishop Kulaw asked me to come to Liberia and preach at that annual conference. When I finally arrived, and it wasn't an easy time of getting there, I met with the lay leadership and asked what they would request as the subject of my sermon on that Sunday. The request, it surprised them. They thought I'd already prepared the sermon, and I said, no, I haven't. And their request was spontaneous, unanimous, and intimidating absolutely to me. For they said, please preach on forgiveness. That they couldn't put it together. How to be forgiving in the face of the atrocities that they had experienced. I visited the destroyed and blood-spattered former home of Bishop Kulaw and his family. I visited the blood-splattered churchyard where 600 women and children were gathered to be sheltered from violence, and they had all been murdered. They were huddled together, unarmed for safety. I preached that day, and at the end of my sermon, I sat down and there was absolute silence. I increasingly felt terrible about my feeble attempt to preach to wounded healers. And I knew as a citizen not of their country, I hadn't experienced what they had experienced. I knew that my sermon had fallen on deaf ears. And Bishop Kulaw told me later that there was silence for 15 or 20 minutes. 2,000 people. Finally, there was a stirring as a lay person stood and moved to the front of the outdoor gathering. And that gathering included members of the rebel forces that had penetrated that conference. The authors of the atrocities were there. And that layperson spoke. He addressed the rebels who were in our midst. To paraphrase what he said, but some of the words are accurate, pretty clear in my memory many years later. He said, I'm the one who watched you shoot dead my wife and children and stood waiting to be murdered. Instead, I received your laughter as you refused to murder me, for my punishment was living with the memories of what you had done to my family. Since that happened for the past year, all I've wanted to do is to kill you. But I stand today to say that I forgive you. Tears flowed, obviously. You were my brothers before you murdered my family. I want you to be my brothers again. As I have wanted to kill you, I realize I've turned my back on my God. I have day by day, since that happened, moved away from my God because of what you did to my family. You have controlled my life. You have tried to destroy my faith. No more. I forgive you. I choose to hug my God today because my God never stopped hugging me. I hope you will be my brothers again, but that's in your hands. What's in my hands is my life and my God of love. I will never forget. I will always remember. And God will walk with me each step I take. Your hate will never defeat my God of love. I stood up. He turned to me and lifted me off my feet and gave me a hug that's lasted for over 30 years. The hugs in that gathered community of faith continued as some persons turned and hugged the rebels who were in their midst. And they began to sing hymns of faith, all about God's goodness, mercy, and love. You see, this is what Utumbu is all about. Forgiveness is in the best self-interest of the one who forgives. Without the miracle of forgiveness, this man would have been imprisoned in the past, never to be healed, unable to take a step into his future. In the place of revenge and hate, this man chose forgiveness. The miracle of forgiveness cannot be explained or defined, only experienced. The title of my sermon that day was Remember and Forgive. I urged that community of faith to abandon any notion to forgive and forget. To forgive and forget is inhumane and impossible. To remember and forgive is divine, agape love, and is in the best self-interest of the forgiver. You know, it's a fulfillment of the Great Commandment. The Great Commandment says, care for God, care for others as you care for yourself. Utumbu is self-care. The best self-care and self-interest for the one who forgives is the experience of being healed. And that's a vital component of discipleship. Amnesia, to forget, is not the way to restoration and reconciliation. Rather, forgiveness is the heart of the gospel. Whether or not the disciple is healed, oh, to be sure the scars remain, but the scars of the wounds no longer cause pain or suffering, for the wounds of the past have been addressed. Whether or not the wounded is healed is dependent upon the experience of Utumbu, the miracle of being forgiven and striving to be forgiving enables the forgiver to be healed. That is the reason we understand forgiveness as being the heart of the gospel. It enables healing to be experienced by the one who has been wronged. So much there. So much of a part of me. And for your thought and conversation, I've got some questions. What are your personal experiences of benefiting from the act of forgiving another? What are your experiences of creating distance between yourself and God's love by refusing to forgive? What stories come to mind other than South Africa when a nation's future has been built on a spiritual value without becoming a theocracy? Thank you for being a part of our journey.